December 7, 1941. A morning that was supposed to be calm, peaceful, and ordinary, until the sky above Pearl Harbor was torn apart by the sound of roaring engines and explosions. Out of nowhere, Japanese planes rained fire and steel upon the American fleet. Amid the chaos, one ship would suffer in a way so horrifying, so haunting, that survivors would never forget its cries, the USS Oklahoma. The Oklahoma, a proud battleship of the United States Navy, was resting quietly alongside Battleship Row. Its sailors were still waking up, some preparing for breakfast, others writing letters home, completely unaware that death was approaching at terrifying speed. And then, it happened. Bombs and torpedoes slammed into the harbor with thunderous force. Within moments, torpedoes streaked across the water, targeting the massive battleships. The Oklahoma was struck, once, twice, then again and again. In less than 12 minutes, the giant steel beast began to roll over, turning helplessly onto its side. Hundreds of men inside were trapped. The ship groaned, screeched, and screamed as its iron body was ripped open, as if the vessel itself could feel the agony of the sailors being crushed within. Men scrambled in total darkness, water flooding in, bulkheads sealing shut. Some pounded desperately on the walls, their fists bleeding against the unyielding steel. Outside, rescue crews heard the muffled knocking, the sound of men still alive, begging to be saved. But with the ship upside down, their chances were fading with each passing second. The harbor was a hellscape. Oil burned on the surface of the water, black smoke blotting out the sky. The air was thick with cries of the wounded, explosions, and the shrieking engines of Japanese planes. But through it all, those haunting sounds from within the Oklahoma, the hollow, echoing hammering on steel, rose like a ghostly chorus of desperation. Those were the screams of a ship, and of her crew, swallowed alive by the sea. For the men trapped inside the USS Oklahoma, time seemed to lose meaning. The ship, once their home, had become a steel prison tilted on its side. Darkness consumed every corridor, water seeped in relentlessly, swallowing passageways, filling compartments one by one. Those who survived the initial blasts were left in a nightmare, fighting not the enemy, but the crushing silence, the rising water, and their own fear. Rescue teams above worked with feverish desperation. From the surface, they could hear it, the faint but chilling tapping, sailors pounding against the hull, sending messages of life from the belly of the overturned battleship. Each hollow knock echoed across the harbor, and with it came a question that haunted the rescuers: how many were still alive, and how much time did they have left? Using hammers, torches, and drills, crews began cutting through thick steel. The work was slow, dangerous, and exhausting. Every spark, every cut was a race against time. The smell of burning metal filled the air as rescuers pushed through, while from inside, muffled voices begged for help. Some of those trapped tapped out patterns, hoping someone outside would hear and understand. After long hours, 32 sailors were pulled to safety. Men covered in oil, drenched, trembling, blinking at the sunlight they thought they would never see again. When their feet touched solid ground, they broke down in tears, not just from relief, but from the unbearable knowledge that friends, brothers in arms, were still inside. But as the days dragged on, the knocking began to fade. Faint at first, then weaker, then gone. The silence that replaced it was unbearable. Rescuers, their hands raw and bleeding from effort, stood helpless as the reality sank in. Hundreds remained entombed within the Oklahoma. The sea had claimed them, and no amount of courage or sacrifice could bring them back. For weeks, divers and salvage crews returned, cutting through twisted iron and flooded compartments. What they found was heartbreaking: men huddled together in darkness, locked arm in arm, some clutching letters from home, others frozen in positions of prayer. These were not faceless soldiers. They were sons, brothers, fathers, ordinary young men caught in extraordinary horror. The Oklahoma herself seemed to groan with sorrow, her massive hull resting on the harbor floor, a once proud battleship reduced to a silent grave. To stand near her was to feel the weight of loss, as if the ship itself carried the cries of her crew within her steel bones. In the aftermath, the world focused on the bigger picture. War had begun, America had entered the fight, and history was being reshaped. But for those who stood at Pearl Harbor, the memory was personal. Survivors spoke of the sound that never left them, the tapping from inside the overturned ship. A sound of hope, that became a sound of despair. A sound that still echoes in the silence of history. Years later, when the Oklahoma was finally raised, the remains of her crew were recovered. Many were laid to rest in mass graves, their names unknown, their families given only the comfort of knowing they had given their lives for their country. Decades after, through DNA and tireless work, some families at last received the closure they had long prayed for. But for many, the loss remained an open wound. The USS Oklahoma was more than steel and armor. She was alive in the voices of her men, in their laughter, their courage, their final cries. On December 7, 1941, she screamed one last time, not in the roar of guns, but in the desperate pounding of trapped sailors begging to be heard. And though the ship is gone, that sound has never died. Pearl Harbor taught the world of war's brutality. But the Oklahoma taught something deeper, that even in the darkest moments, humanity's will to live, to reach out, to be remembered, endures beyond death. So the next time we hear the name Pearl Harbor, let us not only remember the attack that brought America into war. Let us remember the ship that capsized, the men who fought the sea from within, and the haunting silence that followed. Because history is not only written in battles won and lost, it is written in the voices that never made it home. And the USS Oklahoma was one of those voices.